whenever I'm doing work for Argentina and in Argentina, that is a very different conversation. Like even my family and my friends, they don't really understand what I do, right? Like it's just like, what? Like that doesn't exist here. Like they don't really understand. And even if I look back, like, and this is part of the work that every ED&I professional needs to do at some point, or we should be doing every single day, is I had to reflect in the way that I was brought up.
Hey, it's Breaking Barriers, the diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging podcast. We're here for real talk. We're not afraid to go there. And we want you to come away emboldened and energized to take action and make change.
We believe our diversity, our differences, when joined together by a common set of ideals, makes us stronger.
When I set out to help someone, it is my intention to do just that. I'm not trying to do anything other than meet somebody at their humanity.
Your world has changed, but your dreams shouldn't have to. That's why Kirkwood is your next best step. With affordable, flexible, and close-to-home options, now's a great time to start or finish your Kirkwood degree. Learn more at kirkwood.edu/findyourfuture. Displaced or discouraged at work? Kirkwood can help you learn a new skill or totally reinvent yourself for a brand new career. With so many flexible and affordable options, you can get back on track fast. Learn more at kirkwood.edu/findyourfuture.
What up, what up, what up, what up, world? We back again. It's Top Rank, Breaking Barriers, the ED&I podcast. Brought to you by your 5-star presenting sponsor, Kirkwood Community College, and our civil diversity sponsor, PG Cares. Thank you so much for your support. I'm your co-host, Anthony Arrington. I'm here with my partners in crime, Mr. Nick Ford and Joy Briscoe. What's up, everybody? How y'all doing?
Hey.
Nick, you found this great host for us today. You should tell how you found her by accident, too. You should talk about it. So tell us about our host who we got on today.
So we have Dani Herrera, and actually we kind of met by accident. We had, Anthony and I had been in a certification class for a certified diversity executive. And there was a Daniela in there that was part of Herrera Chocolate. And when I went to find her, it was you. And then I started reading your stuff like, oh, this is cool. This is even better. I was like, I love this. This is awesome, the stuff you're doing out there. And watching you grow over about 3-4 years now, I think we've been connected online, watching you grow from what you were doing earlier and just kind of talking your truth, and then, kind of getting into the more messaging out, which is really neat to see. So I'm really excited about this today. So,
yeah. Tell us about her background.
Especially with all our unique ties to New York as well, where she's at now. So, all right. So we're trying not to make her blush too much here. So Dani is an award-winning ED&I professional with 17 plus years of experience in talent operations, recruitment, leadership, and people management. She is committed to building cultures that attract and retain talent from historically excluded communities, constructing strategies that foster inclusion and belonging, and processes that minimize biases. Some of the questions I'll ask her later will be about that from a recent article she just wrote. She is director of recruitment operations and ED&I at RGA, a co-chair of RGA's Latina Employee Resource Group, the Awareness and Advocacy founding partner at Allies in Recruiting, one of the founding members at the Talent Alliance, and one of the ED&I panelists for the NASA Astrophysics, the IDEA Practitioners Database. Actually, the first one I saw with that, I've seen about a dozen of us types out there now. I'm nervous to apply for that. I don't know. She's also a speaker, a career coach, and a content creator on LinkedIn. Some really amazing stuff that she's been putting on there lately. Dani was born and raised in Buenos Aires, Argentina, but has been working in New York City for the last 6+ years. She's been published in Forbes, HR Brew, The Drum. Oh my gosh, Joy, but I do not speak Spanish. I'm sorry, Dani.
Diario La Nación.
There we go. And so many other publications. She also has been an international speaker at events including XSSW, Lesbian Who Tech, Techuria, Manifest Equity, among others. So welcome, Dani. We're really happy to have you with us today, and I'm ready to get going. This is going to be exciting. So let's get right into it.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. That was a mouthful. I didn't know that you were going to read the entire thing.
And that's all you. That's all you.
So. I know. It's a lot.
It is. Joy and I always laugh by that too, because our time in the military is transitioning that into what is compact after 20 years of it, or I think, Joy, you were 15, 16. And it's just, it's like, holy cow. So I start cutting stuff out.
Yep.
So, but it's amazing accomplishments. And like I said, it's really been a lot of fun for me personally to watch your growth, even in that, just in the last, few years. A like us, you were in this before George Floyd and stuff like that. So, it's kind of neat to see. And also, we start our firm as a recruiting company, and you're also recruiting centric in a lot of ways too. So it's very relevant, a lot of the stuff that we read and see that you talk about as well. So,
Awesome.
Anthony, I
That's
think you
great
have
to hear.
our leadoff question.
Well, I got lots of questions for Dani. Well, let's start. Yeah.
Okay, let's go. Let's do it.
Something that was interesting. I when I was reading some of your information and researching, you said about yourself that being intentionally inclusive has always come naturally to you, and you said even when you didn't even know the exact words, you knew that this is ED&I work, equity, diversity, and inclusion work is what you were meant to do. So tell me how you knew that. What made you come to that? Because I think I know I landed in this space by accident doing this work for a living, but it's interesting. I always say I think I was destined to it because my uncle Diedrich Doolin was a social justice warrior for so many years, and I was around it all the time. So how did you know that this was what you were supposed to do?
Yeah, so thank you for that question. And every time that I get it, it's actually a little hard to explain because it's like something that I've always done naturally. But let me try to break it down a little bit. So as you said, I was born and raised in Buenos Aires in Argentina. And unfortunately, still today, the conversation about diversity, equity, and inclusion and race and ethnicity and gender, it's still not at the same level as it is here. Honestly, the conversation about D&I in Argentina is just like getting started, and it's at a completely different stage, completely different level. So I want to say like maybe 15 years ago when I was doing recruiting, just regular recruiting, I would always look for ways, first of all, to make the process itself inclusive, even though I didn't know that was what I was trying to do. And I was always trying to get and attract and interview and hire, between a million air quotes, diverse talent. Right. So again, maybe 15 or 17 years ago, I was trying to partner with organizations that focused on getting more women in technology or people with disabilities, or trying to connect with older generations for roles in the advertising industry that usually tend to be a little bit more, unfortunately, ageist, if you may. So that's how it started. And then when I had the privilege to move here to New York, I realized that the work that I was doing had a different name in a different industry. And yes, I was still doing recruiting, but it was not, between again a million air quotes, the regular recruiting that all of my colleagues were doing. It was something different. So that's basically when I learned that diversity and inclusion was an industry and a discipline that I could work on.
Cool. So
Well, I have a quick question.
Yeah.
So again,
Yeah.
I've been to South America, but not Argentina. Brazil once on a port visit, but what is it like? What is DEI like that there for our listeners? What is it? Is it more like shadeism like you see in the Caribbean, or is it with the indigenous people? Where are they at?
It's so hard to explain. I would say that as of now, the conversation around the ED&I is mostly around gender.
Okay.
And even then, it's just about binary gender. Now, I'm generalizing because if you look back, like Argentina was one of the first countries to legalize LGBTQ marriage, and one of the first countries to legalize having your non-binary identity and your national identity card, if you may. So there are things that are being done, but when it comes to like the population, the conversation, it's not there yet. It's not embedded into the systems. It's not a conversation that happens all the time. And even with race and ethnicity, it is a very, very complicated topic to bring up with anyone back in Argentina. And I'm just gonna go ahead and say it. If you were to ask a regular Argentinian, they would tell you they're very convinced that in Argentina there are no Black people and that we never had Black people, which is of course not true, but that's what we learned at school. Mm-hmm. And if you walk around, we are not as diverse as we are here in the United States. So the conversation is at a completely different level. Usually when someone tries to bring in these topics to the table, they're met with a lot of resistance. And it is hard. Like, even just, I want to say maybe a month ago, give or take, like during the World Cup, there is this amazing, I think she's a writer, an author, and a journalist, and she is from Texas, I believe. And she has a history book about Black history in Argentina. And she wrote this amazing article about why don't we see Black players in the Argentinian like team during the World Cup. And that was a hellhole for that person. I'm so sorry for her, because my friends in Argentina, and every single person, didn't take that lightly. That wasn't an easy conversation. So that's where we are. So just to go back and answer your question, I would say that ED&I in Argentina is mostly about gender. We're like dipping our toes into other topics, but yeah, it's been hard.
How does that impact you, though? Because you are a person that's forward thinking. You're a person now that you've got, I'm a person, I love language, right? Like, I love when you've been doing something, but then you identify like what the language is. Like, you're like, oh, what I've been doing is EDI, right? And so now I have the language, and it kind of empowers you in some way, because then you have a way of communicating what your mission is, what your own personal core values are. But when you come up with that, things in your lineage and back in Argentina haven't progressed at the rate that you've progressed, or the things that you're seeing, how does that impact you? Because even in Iowa, it's kind of similar here, where we have we've led the way in some things where we were like, we're championing these things. And even now, when I think of some of I'm proud to be Iowan, and I'm sure if there are Afro-Latinas from, or would it be, what's the terminology would it be if they're from Argentina?
Yes. So yeah, again, it would really depend on the person, but I would say like Afro-Latina would be the main word that they're using right now.
Perfect.
Yeah.
I'm going to be respectful. But like, it's always weird, because you have this strong sense of pride about your country, your state, the thing that you've been connected to for the good things that you've seen. But then there's also this almost denial of a part of you, or acknowledgement of this part of you. So how does that show up in the work that you do? How does that push you forward, or does it give you pause, or how do you operate in that space?
That is an amazing question. Thank you. To be honest, it really pushes me forward. So, and as you said, I mean, part of my identity, sometimes I have in a way kind of to like divide myself and trying to figure out like, who am I talking to, and how can I bring this conversation to a level that the other person will understand. So whenever I'm doing work for Argentina and in Argentina, that is a very different conversation. Like, even my family and my friends, they don't really understand what I do, right? Like, it's just like, what? Like, that doesn't exist here. Like, they don't really understand. And even if I look back, like, and this is part of the work that every ED&I professional needs to do at some point, or we should be doing every single day, is I had to reflect in the way that I was brought up and raised. And I was socialized and raised with a lot of biases and stereotypes. And a lot of the stereotypes were very racist. So those are the things that I need to break down and try to identify in myself, so I can, not try to embed those biases in the work that I do. So when I do work with and for Argentina, I try to bring the conversation to a level that, yes, is uncomfortable for me and for anyone that is working with me, but that also pushes the conversation forward. And I came to the realization that a lot of people are not going to like me, and that's completely fine. And there is nothing that I can do about it. And when I do work here in the United States and for the United States, it is also interesting, because as we were talking right before we started recording, Latin America is not a monolith, right? And every country has their own identity, and every country, I mean, we all speak Spanish, but we all speak a different level and different type of Spanish, if you may. And then you also have the Latin American community here in the United States, so maybe first generation. So the understanding and the knowledge and the roots that we have sometimes is different. So again, all of those things kind of push me forward in the work that I do, but it does take a lot of like pausing, reflecting, and realizing that my lived experiences, they might be very different to someone that was born and raised here or in a different country in Latin America as well.
Let's dig into that a little bit, Dani.
I love that because
I do.
At first I almost thought like she was describing Iowa.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of similarities.
Let's
like
dig
Joy
into
said.
that. Yeah. So you grew up in Argentina, and I heard you say I was raised, and I had these biases, and some of those biases were racist. I think this is important for listeners, particularly American white listeners who are in positions of leverage who don't know how to break away or are afraid to break. How did you break away? I mean, if you were engulfed in this upbringing of bias and racism, and you know that is what you just said, your country is still that way. How did Dani break away? What was it?
Well, I mean, I wish I could pinpoint like an exact moment. I want to say that yes, when I moved here and I realized that the little bubble and world where I was born and raised, I mean, was just like a tiny, tiny little speck in a world. That definitely helped. And of course, like a lot of education, right? Like for me, like if you follow me in any of my social media channels, you may know that I read a lot. And I'm always trying to learn something new. I'm always taking like an online course and try to learn and educate myself in every single thing that I can potentially do. So I want to say that that's basically what like broke me away from that. But also I wanted to do it, right? I think that the very first step is realizing that that's the way that you were raised. And the second step is, okay, like, this isn't right. Like, there is something that I need to do about it, and you have to do the work.
Right.
And the thing with doing that work is work that it can never stop. It's not like, yeah, okay, I read a book, I watched a documentary, like now I'm woke, and you move on with your life. Like, it is literally something that you need to do every single minute of every single like day of your life. So yeah. I think that's the way to do it. Yeah, that's the way to do it.
Nick, as you were saying, Nick, when you said about Iowa, I hope this is where you was going, because I'm thinking rural, urban, right?
Yes.
Like, we have these conversations in America all the time that there are people in rural America who don't understand the urban experience, or black folks in general, or what have you. And we have to be able to have that conversation, because if that's their lived experience, but you were saying it was a self-realization for you. I'm just wondering, how do we get more rural people to have more self-realization, and how do we get more urban people to have patience?
It's learning and communication. Right? I mean, that's how we look at it, and ingraining it in everything you do. And it's still amazing that there's still people in our state of Iowa even that probably have never seen a person that looks like you, Anthony. Mm-hmm. And it's just like, wow, really? Mm-hmm. I mean, you never leave like the farm. I mean, you never leave the town. I mean,
we talk to a lot of adults. I've talked to Dani. I'd be curious of your experience coming to America, because I know I've talked to a lot of executives in Iowa and the Midwest who will tell me this is the conversation. It wasn't till I got to college. Yep. That I right.
Exactly.
Oh. Do you hear that?
How do you
in your space?
Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, when you talk to white executives, do you get those conversations, Dani?
I do get those comments, and I also got like that realization, like myself, right? And in my case, again, like my country is not, I mean, maybe now it's a little bit more diverse. We're getting a little bit more immigration from some other countries. But when I was growing up, and again, I brought up, like, I wouldn't say similar to rural America, but I'm like kind of similar. So I was born and raised in a very small like town in Buenos Aires, which is the capital city, but outside of the city. So again, not as diverse. But the first time that I saw someone that wasn't like me, I was 17 years old and I was out on vacation. Right. And whenever I have those conversations with white executives, or maybe like cisgender people and talking about the LGBTQ community, or just like anything outside, like anything that looks like them, these conversations come up a lot. And I think that one of the things that kind of help connecting, if you may, is the fact that I can go ahead and tell them, like, you know what, like, you're not alone. That happened to me as well. Like, yes, a completely different country, a completely different setting, but it happens. So what are you gonna do with that information now?
Yeah.
Right? Like, how are you moving forward from that realization?
Now that you know. Right.
So, yeah.
Dani, have you ever used that in those conversations? Because I think this is a great segue to my question too. Anthony was like, how do you gauge from having conversations with a company on an organizational level if they're ready to dive deeper, or if they aren't ready to dive deeper? Because I know in our experience, we've had both happen, right? We've had where we're like, we understand that there is a that you're not there. You're talking to us because you know your organization isn't there, right? And so we're not pointing the finger at, we're not any of those things, because we appreciate that you're ready to do something. Like you said, that acknowledgement piece of, okay, something's not right here. What can I do? How can I work towards racial equity every single day, and equity in general? But in this moment, we're talking about racial equity. Have you ran into that, or how do you discern when someone is like, they think they're ready, they might not be ready yet?
So there are a couple of things, and of course every situation is different, but there are a couple of things that I actually do. And one of them is I ask directly, like, how ready are you to start doing whatever it is that you need to do? Like, in some cases, it's just like, okay, maybe we need to focus on increasing representation for your company. Maybe for some other companies, just like doing the entire thing. Maybe some companies want to focus on equity and some of them on inclusion. Maybe they want to do everything. But the very first question is, how committed are you? And they might not know the answer. So whenever that happens, I try to break it down for them, because especially for executives, normally when they hear the word like diversity, equity, and inclusion, for whatever reason, they focus only on the diversity part.
Yes.
So they go directly, okay, so we need to recruit more people of color. And it is a yes and question, right? So yes, it's that's something that you have to do. Like, yes, you didn't do that before. Let's not great. Let's not focus on that. You do need to increase representation, but in order for you to increase representation, you need to change all of these systems. You need to update all of these processes and all of these policies that you have in place. Are you ready to do this? And when I say, are you ready to do this, I mean, do you have the resources? Do you have the budget? Because sometimes the work actually requires some money. Do you have the team to do this?
And I'll show you your plan.
Right.
Right.
Yep.
Exactly. So when you start breaking it down, you can actually see whether, okay, this is something that I really want to do. I really feel a value on this, and yes, let's do it. Or whether they were thinking about it more from a performative point of view, or maybe they were just not as informed about what diversity and inclusion is, and they were only thinking about the diversity piece. And as a professional that does this work, like, I'm not gonna lie, sometimes this part is very taxing, right? Like, one would assume that at this point, like, we all understand, like, this is something that we need to do. We need to fix, like, centuries of discrimination and biases and stereotypes and racism and all of that. But that's not what happens in reality. So it is sometimes for a professional is about like finding the balance as well, and knowing how much to push. Because if you really realize that the other person is not ready, and when I say the other person, I really mean like the executive, like the person making all of the decisions and signing all of the budgets and approving everything that they need to approve, then there's a different conversation or different like type of solution that you might need to find. And sometimes is maybe this company's not ready yet.
Yeah.
How do you get to the next level then? So you know they want to do it, right? Or at least they say they want to do it. They kind of showing that they're doing it. How do we get them convinced? Because we see a lot in our country where you'll see, we're diverse, and you look at their entry level positions, they are until you start moving up levels, and then it gets less. How do we get organizations to understand that part too, that you have to make the decision makers diverse and work out all the way up to the top?
Yeah. I mean, that's also a tough one, right? I think I know that a lot of ED&I professionals will tell you, yeah, we need to like build a strong business case. And yes, I hear that. I don't necessarily love
I'm
the
not trying to hear
conversation
that.
about
Thank you.
around
I'm
a
not
business
trying to hear
case.
that anymore. Yeah.
Thank you. Like, why? I mean, I get it. Yes, like business leaders, they want to have like a business case. They want to understand like what is the return of investment. But we're past that conversation. Like that shouldn't be happening anymore. But unfortunately, some business leaders will ask you for
Yes.
that information. So whenever that happens, what I try to do is put together as much data as I can
Yes.
and build a story around that data that shows them exactly what is it that they're missing out on,
Yeah.
right?
That.
Because yes, I mean, you could be gaining a lot, but for some business leaders, it's about like what you're missing out on. You're missing out on attracting talent. You're missing out on selling your product to the audience that you want. You're missing out on retaining your talent. And it's instead of saying like, you know what, like if you were going to do this, like you are going to be able to hire more people or whatever that is. And for whatever reason, and that's like human psychology, I'm not a psychologist. Sometimes when you
Right.
phrase it differently, it actually works.
Yeah.
And you're saying the exact same thing.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
a phrasing. Yeah. It's how
I
you're
love that
phrasing.
because they focus on the dollars and cents, the ROI.
Yes. And so when next year the dollars and cents aren't there, the plan didn't
Yeah.
work.
Or we have another company we work with a lot that actually certified us how we're certified. And they're the first ones to say that when the process is working, things will get worse before they get better. Right? People will be more comfortable making complaints and more comfortable saying things. And it might be a little bit where, it's kind of painful for the organization, but then boom. And so you can't see that in data. You can't see that in just the dollars and cents numbers.
So Dani, I want to switch gears kind of a little bit. You mentioned in Argentina when growing up, and we talked about diversity there when Joy asked you what it was like, and you said it was more gender. We know what America is. Race dominates the diversity discussion for a very good reason, and it should. Let's just be, that's Anthony Arrington's opinion. We know the dark history of this country. But let's be honest. I look at you, you come to America. You got, brown hair, you have brown skin, pale skin. You look like a typical white woman in America.
I do.
Let's just be honest. How has that impacted you in this work? Do you get asked questions about that? Do executives say, you know what, you're a white woman, and how do you describe? I'm Latina.
And I was going to say, to me, I would have known you were. I would have guessed that you were but I probably because I've worked in the environment, so I know that there is such a wide array. The spectrum when it comes to people from Latin American countries, from Central America, South America, that it like, because to me I see it, but I would bet if you were in Iowa, most people probably wouldn't see it, and I would, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
it would be very,
and I wouldn't say that I don't see it. You're
100%.
right, Joy. But I'm talking about the average Joe on the street.
Yeah.
Don't see you as Latina. And certainly not the average white CEO when you walk into their office, unless they researched you. So how do you leverage that, or how is it a hurdle, barrier for you?
So it's interesting, right? Because I think I get like different levels of the conversation. I do get the ones that were not like the ones I have an idea on or a stereotype of what a Latina woman looks like.
Mm-hmm.
And then I show up and they're like all confused. They don't really know what to do with me.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one part of the conversation. And then they actually start asking me questions like, but were you really born there? Like all of those like questions that are like, yeah, like we don't look the same. Like they're Asian Argentinians out there. They're Black Argentinians. Like there is literally like in Latin America, it's not a monolith. So that's one piece of the conversation. The other comments that I get is like similar, but not really, is like they kind of assume that I'm like between a million air quotes, like a regular white woman. And then I kind of show up and I bring like all of these ideas, and again, they don't really know what to do with me because they were not necessarily expecting a white woman to break it down for them in the way that I do, and to call them out and to call them in. So that's like confusing for them. And then I do get the other comments that are like, okay, but why are you doing ED&I if you are white, which I completely understand. And that's a conversation that I actually love having, right? Because yes, I am clearly, I'm white, I'm paper white. And I'm also
no, paper white.
I'm translucent. So
there you go. There is different levels, and I'm also an immigrant, and I'm also like so many other things that I do have clearly a lot of privileges that come with the color of my skin, but then there's some other privileges that unfortunately I don't.
Right.
And that's also the life of an immigrant here in the United States. And then if you compare like myself with other white women, like I sometimes don't really belong in those groups, or I feel like I don't belong, right? Because even when having conversations around like salary or transparency or getting promoted and all of those things, I might not really fall into that particular group, and I'm considered Latina. So again, it really depends on like what the conversation is about. But whenever we are talking about ED&I education, it's interesting to see the faces.
I kind of enjoy that actually. When we're at a meeting and I'll say something that, they look at me like, "Oh, you're one of us. You're gonna talk. You're just gonna." I'm like, "Yeah, okay." Yeah. I remember we went to a conference that I think Joy had set up with her cousin, and a white man comes out and he goes, "I'm not telling you anything they haven't told you."
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the privilege is but you got to know
it is there.
Yeah.
It's there.
Yeah.
We fully recognize it,
yeah.
and we fully embrace it, and we at Top Rank here we leverage it with no apologies.
Yeah.
So
100%. That's what you have to do, right? If you have it, you use it, like you leverage it, and you use it to speak up and do things that maybe some other people are not having the opportunity to do, and then you pass the mic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I want to go back to a LinkedIn post. Boy, this was a discussion about a year ago that you had kind of approached, and it was interesting. I mean, it was not all positives on the other side either. And I think we deal a lot. We were talking about generational terms and how why words matter. And I believe you brought up the topic of Latin as a word and use, right? So I'm sure you probably have a little trauma from that post still, just because it was a lot of like some way out comments.
Oh.
Right? And why that matters. Why? And even within your own community, I mean, Latino, Latinx, you hear Latinx people fighting because that whole LGBTQ part thrown in. And how do you navigate that? And where are we at with that now? Because
with that,
Sure.
Because that post was, like I said, it was an interesting, some interesting comments.
Yeah, I love talking about it, and honestly, like. And this is something that I do with every topic. Like, yes, of course, as an ED&I professional, there is a certain level of like patience and understanding that you have to have. But there are topics that I don't really have the patience for. So if someone is going to be openly racist or homophobic, I don't have time for that. So I'm going to like shut it down immediately. And that's something that happened with that post. And whenever I talk about like Latina or Latinx or Latino, Latina or Hispanic. So to summarize, so basically, my community has a lot of different words that we use to describe ourselves. So it really depends on who you ask. They're going to tell you something different. So Hispanic, for instance, I don't necessarily love. That's a word that was coined by the U.S. government when they were trying to do a census. They try to push everyone together. But the problem with Hispanic is that we are not acknowledging anyone that doesn't speak Spanish. So all of the native populations in Latin America, the people of Haiti, the people of Brazil, they don't really speak Spanish. So they don't really fall under the Hispanic category, right? And then we also have to think about Spanish as a language is inherently biased because it's gendered. It's inherently gendered. So the word The word for table is female, and the word for book is male. Like, there is no rhyme or reason to it. That's how it works. So for a Latino woman, it would be Latina. For a man, it would be Latino. So that's kind of okay. Like, kind of works out. However, we are not thinking about our non-binary and transgender siblings when we are talking about Latino and Latina. So something that happens, I want to say, I was very young, like in the very beginning of the internet days and the chat rooms. So something that we used to do back in the day when we wanted to be inclusive, we used to use like the at symbol, so Latin and the at symbol. So it worked in writing, but it didn't really work when you wanted to say that out loud. That cannot be spoken aloud. There is no way to say that word. So I want to say that maybe 5 years or 7 years went by, and we kind of started using the X instead of the at symbol. So it became Latinx, which is easy to pronounce here in English in the United States, but it's not easy to pronounce in Spanish. And in Spanish would be something like Latinx, which is, it's very long. Like it's not something that like we would use. So a couple of years ago, well, I don't want to say like a couple of years ago, but maybe 5 years ago, something that started happening in Argentina actually is we started to change the X to an E. So Latine, which is actually like, we have words in Spanish that end in A. So it's something that already exists in that language and something that we can kind of all agree on, if you may. However, with that said, there are a lot of people out there that identify as Latinx, and that is completely fine. That is a valid identity, and we should all be respecting that. However, within my community, which, again, going back to the fact that Spanish itself is very biased and is gendered and all of that, and there are like all of these other stereotypes that my community has against the LGBTQ community, and again, like issues with gender and machismo and all of that, like people in Latin America and certain communities within the Latina community here in the United States completely despise the word Latinx. And they will let you know. They will let you know very loudly. And that for me is dangerous, again, because we are denying someone's identity, right? But yeah, I mean,
so how
looking back, yeah.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Go ahead.
No. What I was going to say, like a lot of people now are using Latina, but that doesn't necessarily mean that there are people out there that are using Latinx or maybe Hispanic still.
Right. So I guess to kind of put a bow on that, like, so what would you tell listeners how to identify the Latina or Latinx community? My answer would be vulnerable. It's okay to understand in some communities you may get called out for that, and accept that, not as an attack on you, but that there's different
learning moment.
There's learning moment, and there's different languages for different communities or different areas of the world.
Well, like just now, I mean, I always thought it was Latine from reading it, but it's Latine.
So what would you say? How would you tell executives or folks to identify the community?
Yeah, so I usually go like, again, it really depends what context, right? Because the post that Nick was talking about was actually focused on the advertising community, because they were like, so I broke it down depending on generations. Right. Okay. So we can talk about that. But for executives, I usually go with Latina, because that's what my community has been using lately. Gotcha. However, I do let them know, and there is a caveat there, and I always say, don't be afraid to ask. Like if you're talking to someone and you're not sure if you're using the right word, if you're not, like, in the same way that you would ask someone how to pronounce their name properly, that's something that we can do with the way that we identify ourselves. And it doesn't have to be an awkward conversation. I understand that for many people it could be. But what if you get it wrong? Like, what's going to happen? Nothing. Like, the other person is going to tell you, hey, you know what? Like, I actually go by Latino, and that's fine. You move on.
my daughter always, my oldest, she says, it's okay. It's almost a courtesy to ask people, how do you want to show up in this conversation? Like, how do you want me to address you? It's okay.
Exactly.
And I think that's even happening in the Black community too, because you have people that are still, some people are okay by going by African American. Some people are like, nope, I'm not African. Black American. Some people are like Black. And then also the interesting thing is, if I'm an immigrant, if I'm a Black immigrant, a lot of times I may not even identify, because race is a construct, right? Yeah. So I may say, "Oh, I'm South African," like, or "Oh, I'm whatever have you." And so the best way, I think, is to ask. I don't think people, really get offended by just saying, "Hey,
Well, it's not much different. It shouldn't be much different. It is, but it shouldn't be much different than asking someone how to pronounce their name.
Yeah, that's what Dani was saying. Yeah,
I mean, it should just be that simple. I mean, I don't think I've ever seen anyone truly upset by being asked. Now, if they get asked 5 times by the same person, maybe they keep messing up. That's a different issue. But
so as experts, we're all in this space. We all do this work. So Dani, from your view, what do you do? What do you say to those individuals who say, and I know this happens, why do we have to worry about the she, he? Why do? I get it. I'm not offended. I understand, Nick, you want to be called that, but why do we have to worry about that? Can't we just call you Nick like we always have? What do you say, Dani?
All right, so I'm gonna tell you a story, and I wouldn't recommend doing this like always. I only did it once because we were having a conversation and this person wouldn't get it, but it wasn't the fact that this person wouldn't get it because they didn't understand. You could really see that they didn't really want to get it. Right. And the whole conversation was about just having the conversation and making a point. So we were having about this conversation about like gender identity and pronouns. And this person was like, yeah, but you know what, like they, them, that doesn't make sense. That's not grammatically correct. And this person refused 100% to at least be open to having that conversation. And as you were saying, it's just like, why do we need to do this? Like, why things are changing? So we went over the conversation and the explanation and the information like many times. There were other people in the room as well, and you could see that the conversation wasn't going anywhere, and it was actually making other people uncomfortable. And there were people that used they pronouns in the room that were very very uncomfortable for that situation. So, and again, I don't recommend doing this. I did it only once because I really needed to prove a point with this person. So what I did is just I randomly started to use the wrong pronouns with this person, and I started addressing this person with a completely wrong name. Mm-hmm. So I was like, as she was saying, Juan, and this person clearly wasn't Juan. And then at some point, he actually got it. Huh. He understood that we were actually talking about someone's identity, and that we were not talking about a preference or something that someone would do to make someone, I don't know, like uncomfortable, or just to be complicated, or to like attention seeking, because those are the conversations that we usually get. Like, yeah, people are trying to like seek attention and all of that. So again, I don't recommend doing this ever often. This was a safe space, and again, I really needed to prove a point because there were people that were like being hurt about how the conversation was taking place. So usually what I do is, I mean, again, it's a little radical. I wouldn't recommend doing it often. But again, I mean, you can sometimes it does take a radical solution, right? Because you can go over the information, all the education, all the data. You can show videos. You can let them know, like, you can do everything that you can do. And sometimes people don't really get it because they don't, and they need to do a little bit more work on themselves. Yeah. But there are people that actually don't really want to get it. And again, as we were saying before, like sometimes I lose patience.
Yep. So we all do.
Boy, we got so many questions. As we always say, we need to do a part 2 of this.
Yeah. We got to get to our listener
question. My big question, though, was going to be about marketing and the branding and everything we see out there. But go to follow her on LinkedIn. Follow Dani on LinkedIn, and you have a newsletter and you have all kinds of information. It's just such awesome material. And please make sure you check her out there.
Absolutely.
So our listener question, and I know we've talked about this too, Danny, is actually from Linda up in Waterloo, which is just up the road from us, where Joy's at, up in her neck of the woods. And her question is, we want to have keynotes and people come speak at our events, but I get a lot of pushback about, how do I pay someone? And I know you have a unique situation. So could you maybe answer her question about how your unique situation is, but also in general, because we're always big proponents too. It's like, you got to start
question?
Yeah. You want to have someone come from keynotes, and she's getting pushback on, like, you need to pay people, you need to take care of them. And how do I go about doing that? What's the right way to do it? Right.
Gotcha.
And I know you have a unique situation as well that is different from anything else that we see. Maybe answer a question there.
Sure. So what I would say is, whenever you're bringing in an expert, could be a speaker, a consultant, whatever it is. I mean, and again, it really depends on how big your company is, or if it's like only your little tiny company, it's only you and another person. But you do have to make an effort to compensate the expert for their knowledge, their time, their effort, whatever it is. And that could take a lot of shape or forms. Yes, usually and hopefully you can actually pay that person, and that would be ideal. However, as Nick was saying, like, sometimes, unfortunately, speakers like me, we cannot charge. And in my case, it's because of my visa status. In some other cases, it could be maybe someone has a disability, and if they get extra income, they might lose some of the benefits that they have. So there's so many other different situations out there that we need to consider. But the very first step as a company should always be offer to compensate the person for their time, their knowledge, and their effort. So say that you cannot pay them. You literally can't. Like, your company is only you and another person. You don't have any budget. There are certain things that you can do to compensate the other person's time anyway. You can offer to share that webinar with bigger companies that can actually hire that person and actually pay them for their time. You can use the time to market whatever it is that they have ongoing. Maybe it's like their website or their podcast or whatever that is. You can offer them a discount on the products that you sell or the platform that you have. Again, there's so many ways. Of course, the ideal way to pay someone is with money, but assuming that you simply can't, or that the other person can't take a money payment, there's always something that you can do. Something that I do, for instance, is I ask for donations in my name instead. So again, there's always something that we can do about it.
Yep.
So you have done some keynotes, correct? I believe recently you did one. So do they at least pay for your travel? Can they do that even, or how's that?
If we wanted to do it, if the company wanted to do it, yes, that's something that we can. But lately, like, everything is virtual, so that's completely fine. And anything that is local, I mean, I do it myself. That's completely fine. There is always something that they give me, like, I don't know, like a T-shirt or something like that. I mean, fine. But lately, everything is virtual, so it kind of works out for everybody.
Yeah, gotcha. I think the lesson there is pay us for our work.
100%.
Well, it doesn't have to be money pay either.
Yeah.
Compensate. I like that. Compensate for the work.
Exactly. Yeah. Compensate someone for their work and time. Yeah.
Well, Dani, we are nearing the end of our show. As we say to every guest, we could talk all day. But this is about you and about Dani. So I want to make sure before we close out, is there anything that we haven't talked about? Is there any lesson or anything you want to share with our listeners around diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging that would be impactful as we close out?
Yeah, something very, very short. Like, it doesn't really matter where you are in your ED&I journey. I want to say that one of the most important things is, like, truly being intentional about the efforts that you want to make and being intentional about your journey. If you realize that there is something that you don't know, like, okay, you realize that, do something about it to fix that situation. And then keep that intentionality going with everything that you do. So, yeah, very short and sweet.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much. Jordan, take us out here. Yes.
Thank you so much, Danny. This has been so good. Again, I love it. I love these conversations. This is a unique one too, in that we even got to dive across how this energy is showing up in other countries and your experience, and then coming here and how you use your experience to relate with executives of large country or companies and things of that nature. So we've covered so many gems. I'm just so excited about so many things. So we want to thank you again for joining us today. We just so appreciate your time. And again, also thanking our sponsors, Community Savings Bank, Tyler Lincoln Barnes, and of course, our 5-star presenting sponsor, Kirkwood Community College, and also our silver diversity sponsor, PG Cares.
Yes.
And if you have any more questions or comments or suggestions, feel free to contact us at info@toprankedtalentsolutions.com.
Great. Special thanks to our listeners as well. We couldn't do this without you. So hope you enjoyed Dani today. She gave you an earful or a visual full on the video. So we hope you enjoyed the conversation today. And we appreciate our time. So keep an eye on our next episode. Keep an eye on this one and continue to watch Breaking Barriers as we continue to move forward. Yep. Thank you so much for your time, Dani.
Yeah, thank you, Dani.
Keep breaking
Nick,
barriers.
good one, Nick. Dani was awesome.
You're awesome. Everybody follow Dani online.
Yes, definitely.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Dani.
All right, have a great one.
Our differences, when joined
All right,
together by a common set of ideals, makes us stronger.
When I set out to help someone, it is my intention.